I never believed in karma until I watched blood drip from my 8-year-old son's broken nose while my sister stood there laughing like she just won the lottery. That crimson drop hitting the floor wasn't just blood. It was the moment I realized my family wasn't just toxic, they were monsters. And monsters. They deserved to be slayed. My name is Tara, and this is the story of how I went from being a shadow in my own family to the woman who brought an empire to its knees with nothing but truth, talent, and the unbreakable love of a mother who refused to let her child's pain be meaningless. Growing up, I was the invisible daughter in a house where silence was survival. My older sister Britney ruled like a queen while I existed like a ghost. If she kicked a hole in the wall, our father Russ would blame the wall for being weak. If I asked for an extra blanket during winter, he'd rip it away saying, "Princesses don't get spoiled in this house." But I wasn't asking to be a princess. I was just asking to be warm. At 18, I escaped that prison and built a life 2 states away. I married, had my beautiful son Jonah, and when my husband abandoned us before Jonah could even say, "Daddy," I worked 2 jobs to make sure my little boy never went to bed feeling unloved or unwanted. Jonah was everything I never had as a child. Curious, gentle, with a heart so pure it made my chest ache. He loved books the way other kids loved video games, reading under blankets with a flashlight until I'd find him asleep with a story still clutched in his tiny hands. Last year, when I lost my job and rent prices skyrocketed, Britney called with an offer that seemed too good to be true. "Why don't you move back home for a while? It'll give you time to get back on your feet." I should have known better. Britney never did anything out of kindness. She did it for an audience. We moved into what they called the guest room, a converted storage closet with a mattress on the floor and one window that barely opened. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Dad ruling like a drunk king, Britney as his cruel second-in-command, and Mom floating around like a ghost in her own body, always cleaning things that weren't dirty. For weeks, I kept my head down, cooking and cleaning like I was 13 again. I told Jonah to be extra polite, to say thank you for everything, to never ask questions. But children aren't meant to shrink forever. The first red flag came when I caught Britney going through Jonah's backpack. When I asked why, she sneered, "I'm checking for drugs." Kids lie, especially ones raised by single mothers. Jonah heard every word. That night, he curled up next to me and whispered, "Mom, why does Aunt Britney hate me?" I had no answer, just tears he couldn't see in the darkness. A week later, disaster struck. Jonah accidentally knocked over a vase while reaching for a library book on the top shelf. He immediately came to tell me what happened, but before I could even stand up, Britney had already stormed in and grabbed him by the arm. "You little snitch," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "That vase cost more than your entire wardrobe." Then, before I could scream, before I could move, before I could protect my baby, she shoved him. Hard. The sound will haunt me forever. Jonah's small body hitting the wall. The crack of drywall. Then his scream, not just pain but confusion. He didn't understand what he'd done wrong. I ran like my soul had left my body. Found my son on the floor, blood pouring from his nose, tears streaming down his cheeks, clutching his face like he was trying to hold himself together. "You hurt my son," I screamed, gathering him in my arms, shielding his broken body with mine. But Britney wasn't done. She pointed at us like we were trash and barked, "That's what happens to liars." And then, from the living room I heard it. Dad's laugh. That deep, disgusting chuckle that told me everything I needed to know. "That's what happens when you raise a tattletale," he called out. "Don't like it. Door's right there." That night I packed our bags. My son had gauze stuffed in his nose and a black eye forming like a dark storm cloud on his innocent face. I whispered, "We're leaving in the morning, baby." But I'd underestimated their cruelty. Britney had locked all the doors. She took the keys, hid my phone and told Jonah, "Your mom's running away because she's weak." We were trapped for 3 more days. 3 days of psychological warfare that felt like 3 years. Britney calling Jonah names. Accidentally stepping on his toys, threatening to throw his beloved books in the trash. Dad turning up the TV every time I tried to speak. Mom placing untouched plates of food on the counter but never making eye contact, like acknowledging us would make her complicit. It was hell. But they forgot one crucial thing. I grew up in that house. I knew every inch of it, every creaky floorboard, every loose tile. And I knew how to escape. At 3 a.m., I wrapped Jonah in 2 jackets, stuffed his backpack with essentials, and we crawled through the attic vent. We dropped down into the neighbor's yard and ran until my legs gave out. I called a friend from a gas station payphone, and she drove 2 hours to rescue us, no questions asked. We never looked back. I moved us into a shelter for 2 weeks, then into subsidized housing. I got a job at a local print shop and enrolled Jonah in a new school. But something inside me had fundamentally changed. I kept seeing the blood, hearing that laugh, watching my son shrink under their voices. The worst part. Jonah stopped reading. The boy who once begged for just one more chapter, every night now stared at his books like they were weapons. He walked around school like a ghost in oversized sneakers, afraid of doing anything that might be wrong. One night I heard him whisper into his pillow, "I didn't mean to be bad." That broke me completely. I stayed up until sunrise, and by morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not scream, not post online, not call the cops. No, I would give them something they never expected. Fear, humiliation, and irreversible consequences. While working at the print shop, I picked up freelance design gigs, logos, invitations, packaging. It paid almost nothing at first, but I stayed up every night after Jonah fell asleep, sharpening my skills like a weapon. 3 months later I had 1 client, then 3, then 10. A woman named Kay from New York saw my work and offered to mentor me. "Your eye for detail is insane," she said. "You ever think about launching your own brand?" I laughed at first, but the seed was planted. I named it Ghost Nest. Art inspired by pain that refuses to die. Broken porcelain, ripped silk, torn paper patched with gold. Every design told a story of survival. It exploded faster than I ever imagined. I sold out my first 300 hoodie orders in 2 weeks. By month 4, I had a small team and a new apartment. Jonah got his own room with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and shelves lined with books again. That's when Britney messaged me. "Look who finally decided to be somebody. Hope you don't forget the family who raised you." I didn't reply, but I remembered something she once said to Jonah. "Snitches get what they deserve." I'd been collecting evidence since that night. Every receipt, every text, every bruise documented in hospital reports from the urgent care clinic I'd visited after our escape. One of the nurses had quietly filed a report without my asking, saying, "In case you ever need this." Some stories need proof. A lawyer named Meister Holstrom reached out after discovering my brand through his daughter. When I showed him the folder I kept locked under my bed, he sat with it for an hour, then said, "You ever consider suing your father and sister for damages?" I hesitated, not because I was afraid of losing, but because I wanted something better than a courtroom win. I wanted to burn down the version of themselves they'd built for the world. So we didn't sue. We offered them a job. My team reached out using a fake brand name, Wild Glass, a luxury startup looking for ambassadors in small towns. Britney fell for it completely. She showed up to the interview in a bright pink blazer and heels too tall for the gravel driveway. My photographer filmed everything from a van across the street. She bragged about her great family values, saying, "I've helped raise my sister's son. He's like my own. I really know how to shape character." I didn't need to show the world that clip directly. I just sent it to the company Britney had applied to work for. They posted a statement 3 days later. "We do not work with individuals involved in domestic abuse, especially against children. Effective immediately. All offers and affiliations are void." It went viral. Small-town news picked it up. So did the blog I'd quietly sponsored weeks before, anonymously feeding them the full story with evidence. Not gossip, not vengeance, but documentation. It ripped their reputation apart. But I wasn't done. 1 month later I sent my father a package. Inside was a hardcover book of Ghost Nest designs. Page 14 featured a sketch titled "Silence Bleeds," A cracked wall with a child's shadow imprinted like a scar. Underneath in small print. Inspired by Jonah, age 8. Survivor. He never responded, but I knew he saw it because Mom called the next week sobbing. "We didn't know it hurt you that bad." I didn't answer because she did know. She saw the blood. She watched me beg. She vacuumed while I held ice to my son's face. The next call came from Britney. Her job gone, her local sponsorships cancelled. She cried into the phone like a stranger. "You ruined me, Tara. You destroyed everything." "No," I whispered. "You did." Then I hung up. Jonah stood beside me while I did it. He looked up and asked, "Was that Aunt Britney?" "Yes." "What did she want?" Smiled. "To be forgiven." Jonah looked down for a moment, then simply said, "I'm glad you didn't." The dust hadn't fully settled. Even after Britney lost everything, I knew there was one thing they still clung to: their illusion of control. They thought I'd come back begging eventually. But we weren't on a bridge. We were standing on the ashes of a prison they'd built, and I was just getting started. Jonah had started therapy, and one afternoon he looked at me and said, "Can I draw something for Ghost Nest?" He drew a house split in two. One side covered in vines and chains, the other side a window open with birds flying out. He titled it, Finally. When Dad's rusted lumber supply business tried to sponsor a school event in our district, I didn't scream. I got involved. I donated under Ghost Nest anonymously, offering full funding and custom design workshops in exchange for one clause: no affiliation with any party under investigation for child endangerment or abuse. The board approved instantly. Dad was erased from the stage he'd used for 30 years to pretend he was a pillar of the community. He showed up anyway on event day, wearing his old branded polo, trying to hand out flyers. I watched from across the field as the principal gently asked him to leave. He turned red, barked something ugly, but then he saw the shirts all the kids were wearing. Jonah's design, Finally, printed in bright, joyful yellow. He just walked away. Alone. No one stopped him. No one looked him in the eye. 2 weeks later, Jonah got a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photo of him at age 7, holding a soccer trophy. The back read, "We miss you. Please forgive us." He looked up at me and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I shook my head. "You did everything right. That's why they're scared now." He nodded slowly, then ripped the photo in half. The final twist came when Counselor Elaine reached out, wanting to partner with Ghost Nest. "You turned survival into strength, into story," she said. "We could do something bigger together." That year, Ghost Nest partnered with 3 shelters, released a special line called Wall Breakers, and funded 10 art scholarships for kids healing from abuse. On launch day, I stood on stage with Jonah by my side. Britney was in the crowd. I knew she'd show up, her hair dull, her smile tight, standing by the door like she belonged in the background now. But I raised the microphone and said, "To the children who were silenced, your voices are art. And to the people who tried to destroy that art, you didn't win. You just gave us something unforgettable to paint with." Jonah grinned and held my hand tight. Britney wept, not because we invited her back, but because she realized we didn't need her anymore. None of them. We had each other, we had our empire built from pain, and we were finally, completely, beautifully free. Some people try to break you, but sometimes they just teach you how strong you really are. And sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they said you'd never be.